We're recording now.
Thank you. I wanted to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded for our Workforce Development Board Executive Finance Committee, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. Good afternoon, members. I guess our first order of business is approval of the minutes. We have two sets of minutes to approve, so they do require a motion and a second and a vote. So you should have had it in your packet. So we had a Executive Finance Committee minutes on 5/16, and we had an Executive Committee Finance on 6/28.
Mr. Chair, I call for approval of the minutes. Do we need to do them individually, or can we do them both?
We probably ought to do them individually. So just because there were two separate meetings.
All right, so I call for approval of the minutes from the 5/16/22 meeting.
We have a motion. We have a second. I guess, can I second as the chair?
Yes, I believe you can.
Okay, then I'll second that. I'll second the minutes, and all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. The next set.
And Mr. Chair, I call for approval of the Executive Finance Committee meeting minutes from 6/28/22.
I'll second that motion. So all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, our minutes have been approved. Is the director on? Would you like to speak for a minute?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you all know, it has been a very challenging time in the region. I've spent some time in some of our shelters with the flood victims. We've been working with the Red Cross as well as with MARC, which is the Regional Alliance of Resource Providers for the Victims. I suppose once we're past this emergency period, will be a time to just assess in terms of employment, businesses that were lost, incomes that were paused because of the flooding, that type of thing. But more importantly, as I always say in my session, thanking the board for its leadership. But next month will be a year for me here. And what a year it has been. And to the staff and to the board, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Director. And when we get the full board towards the end of the month, I look forward to the report and hype, what you want to address with us and give us an update on a lot of the recovery plans going on around. So thank you very much for all that. The next item is board chair remarks. I don't have any remarks for the committee today. I'd like to go straight into, since we've got some votes to do, Greg, the director's report.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair and Director Hayes and committee members. Good to see you all today on this kind of muggy summer day. It's hard to believe that we're already at the next board meeting coming up. As you know, we had some unique situations that required us to have multiple executive committee meetings and a special board meeting since the last official quarterly meeting in May. So we're getting to see each other more often. It won't be that we always have to do special board meetings. Jason, you've had the pleasure of presiding over, some of that unique time of having multiple meetings. So we appreciate everyone's accessibility in participation. We know how much you all have to do on your day-to-day basis, including staff that make time for these meetings as well. So appreciate everyone prioritizing this today. Before I go into just a couple updates, and I won't be too long today myself because we have a pretty packed agenda. I want to make sure that Ms. Parker Lewis is able to have microphone capabilities. I don't know if there's a technical issue going on, but Vanessa, if you're able to If you're having trouble hearing us, or you're having trouble speaking, please maybe let Ethan know or somebody know so that we can try to troubleshoot. And Ethan, if you're on, if there's any way that you can work, or someone else on the call can work with Miss Parker Lewis to assist her. Appreciate it. Okay, well, I will go ahead and get started with just a quick update. Let's start with what's going on today in the news. We're not going to do a news report here, but I saw a headline that said that employers added 528,000 jobs, 528,000 jobs. Yes, almost half, or a little bit more than 500,000 jobs in July, and that said shattering all expectations. And so, what we know is that we've had a tough year when it comes to inflation, rising costs related to energy and food. And we've had the Fed hike interest rates now 4 times this year to try to get inflation under control. But we are still seeing a unique labor market where there's jobs being created and jobs that still need to be filled. Layoffs aren't significant right now, despite some speculation by economists that we might either be on the verge of a recession or we might already be in one. But those things don't get called until normally after the fact. And so we're kind of witnessing unique circumstances again with this GDP maybe a little bit lower, but seeing the growth in jobs still. The other reality is that we do continue to see that there are folks who have left the labor market altogether. We also see folks who continue to come in our job center filing for unemployment in these times, and that's still significant. That's a significant portion of the people who are coming into our job center. We still see dislocated workers who are being laid off, and the healthcare industry is one where there are more layoffs than others. The industries that seem to be creating the jobs are in leisure and hospitality right now, which probably makes sense given that it's the summer and folks are traveling more. Although at the same time, with this rise in COVID cases, I think there's also some cooling there too, of folks choosing not to go out and eat in restaurants like they did before. So it's like I said, an interesting time to be doing the work that we're doing. Our work is so essential to our local economy and to this bigger picture of the times that we're living in. And so, we'll reflect on some of the ways that the board is working to address those, the needs of the people that we're serving today. But we'll have a more thorough report too at our board meeting on some of the results from the last program year, some of the success stories that we've had, some of the challenges that we're facing and ways that we're moving forward through that. But again, there'll be a more comprehensive report that we share. We typically do that end of year report at our August meeting. So you can expect to see that then. I just want to give a quick update to this group here. And I need some ability to share the screen. I don't have sharing capabilities at the moment. And if not, that's okay. I can also just read from one of the slides I was going to share. But if, I don't know, Ethan, can you assign me privileges to share screen, or Laura?
I'm not host. Dave, are you still here?
He may have gotten off.
Yes, I'm here. I'll see if I can promote you to host.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're set as host now.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, for some reason it's not pulling up the slide, but it was really just one slide, and I'll just kind of recap for you all what was on it. But one thing that we want to note is that since the last meeting that we had, we've extended contracts with our subrecipients. You all approved that at our last meeting to approve the funds that we could allocate to move forward on those extensions, and those extend through August. And when we get to our next board meeting, we'll be asking the board to approve a renewal contract for each of the subrecipients that we currently have. That was a decision that was made at the last special board meeting to enter into those renewal contracts. And so we'll present new funding award amounts at that next meeting. We've been reviewing the COVID-19 budget and we'll be submitting a modification to the Office of Workforce Development for that. As you all recall, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the agenda, that was a project that we asked the executive committee to review a strategy for. We want to increase our expenditures and increase our enrollments in that program. But first, we have to create a new budget for that, and that was part of the strategy that you saw within that document to make sure that we effectively spend down those funds and also meet our enrollment targets. We've been reviewing contracts and looking at budgets for the PY 2022 program year. As you recall, we received that funding later than normal this year. This is the reason why we had some of those special board meetings. And we have the request for legislation right now in process with St. Louis County to ultimately authorize us to begin using the PY 2022 funds or to create budgets for those PY 2022 funds. So that'll again be something that we present to the board at the August meeting, but currently we're working with our subrecipients in looking at that budget internally so that we can present to the full board. We have a new one-stop operator who will be starting with us in mid-August. Most of you got to know Deborah Stovall. She had been serving in that role as one-stop operator for FWCA for this current kind of contract cycle that we've been on, but she's since retired and has moved to California, or is in the process of moving to California to spend more time with her children and her grandchildren. So we wished her well in her retirement there, but it's obviously a transition period now because she's been the one-stop operator for the last 2 years. And so, as you all know, the one-stop operator is a very important role. It's the role that's responsible for making sure that the job center is functioning the way it needs to be functioning. It's the role that ensures that we are making sure that service delivery is being fully exercised within the center, but also across our affiliate sites, and leveraging our WIOA required partners. That one-stop operator is really kind of a traffic cop, making sure that those folks are organizing and coordinating their services to best serve the customers that we have coming into the center. So Carolyn Seward has recruited a new staff member. Her name I'll just share with this committee here. She hasn't officially started yet, but her name is Kelly Lingle. She works currently for Talify, if you're familiar with that assessment tool that we use. But she previously served as the deputy director of Slate under Michael Holmes when he was the director of Slate, so a little while ago. Somebody on this call knows her name before she was married and became Kelly Lingle, but you might recognize the name if somebody knows it. I think Kelly Bernardi, that's it. Kelly Bernardi.
That's it.
Yeah, it just came to me. Kelly Bernardi is her name, but she's well known in kind of the workforce ecosystem. She's known by our friends at the state of Missouri as well. So we think she'll add a lot of value. And Howard, you may even know her, I'm assuming, too. I have not really interacted with her much outside of Talify, but having been at Slate previously, I don't think she was still there when you were there, but you may have had some connection.
I know her, even at SLDC, partnership with Slate under Michael Holmes, and she was his deputy. Also, she had a successful tenure at Washington University. So she's bright and talented, knows workforce, and I didn't know this, but that's a bit of luck for us.
Yeah, I think she'll add a lot of value to the work we're doing. She hasn't, like I said, she hasn't started yet. She's projected to start. Carolyn recently just informed us that she's extended the offer to Kelly to start at some point in mid-August, so in the next couple weeks. And so before the next board meeting, we should have her in place and be able to introduce her to the full board. But Kelly, like I said, I've had a good working relationship with her at Talify, so we think she'll bring some of that insights that she's gained working with that tool. She's been working with our job center actually to train some of our staff on how to better utilize Talify as well. So we think that she'll bring a lot of value to the team. So that's an exciting announcement I just wanted to alert you all to. And then wanted to highlight a construction career expo that the Missouri Job Center at Northwest Crossings has hosted in July since our last meeting, and is now planning an upcoming event in August as well. But I will turn it over to Derek Collins to share some insight about that event from the previous event that we had, some of the results from that event, and then looking ahead, because I think this is an exciting opportunity to share with the executive committee. So Derek.
Thank you, Mr. Laposa, and good afternoon, everyone. I concur with Mr. Laposa. We are very excited about the upcoming Construction Expo event scheduled for August 10th, which is next Wednesday, from 9 to 12 here at the St. Anne location. Now, the initial one took place July the 13th, of which we had exactly 17 employers and over 70 job seekers came to this facility and participated in that wonderful Construction Expo event, the initial one, again, July 13th. We also we're very fortunate to have media coverage that particular day. We had 104.1, we had KMOV, KSDK, and Newsreel STL live stream. So we had coverage, we had a great turnout, we had great weather, and all went extremely well. And therefore, we are anticipating an even greater turnout next Wednesday. And part of the reason we're anticipating this great turnout is because we've been fortunate to partner with additional resources and teams throughout the metropolitan area. We met a young man by the name of Andy Anderson, who's with the transition team. The transition center. And he shared with us that he's going to bring 12 individuals that are looking for employment. We partnered with Job Corps under the leadership of Brian Gray. He's bringing folks, as well as Larry Davis from Youth Build. And we've stretched out to other program services with Dream Builders, STL Youth, U City Adult Education Centers. So we've done a great job of expanding our partnership and networking even greater. And as a result, we have 22 employers committed to this event. So we went from 17 to 22, and perhaps we'll have over 100 job seekers. The challenge that we have, and I must share this with you, is that we're doing better with outside or external partnerships than we are internal. We need our subcontractors to do more to get the word out, to get folks coming in to partner and participate. And the reason I share this with you is because we track individuals that come into the center and we ask them, how did you hear about it? And when they tell us, we record it. So we know based on their firsthand conversation with us, how it was shared. So we must do a better job within our internal partners of getting this word out throughout the community so that we can serve our residents much better. And again, we've done a great job with the St. Louis County staff. We have Elizabeth and Peter with St. Louis County, who's done a wonderful job of getting the word out via social media outlets. And our very own Ethan Dixon, he's done a great job with his pre-registration process. We have over 40 individuals that have pre-registered for this event. And then we reached out to the state. There's a young lady by the name of Jill. She sends out text messages, and she's done that for us. And then, of course, Tom, the president of Construction Forum, he's used his social media platform. So we're excited about this upcoming event next Wednesday, and I hope it's as successful or greater than the one we had on July 17th. And Mr. Laposa, if I may add one more topic to the report that I'd like to share with you guys, and that's the Iwt program. I feel so proud of the team, Brandon Bryant and Proud Pierce. They've done a great job with the Construction Expo as well as with the Iwt program. We continue to do a super job with WashU. We've met or exceeded the number of cohorts we anticipated. We're at number 12 with the Iwt program, which has resulted with over 60 placements. And WashU is very pleased with what we've done. Along with the MA program, we've exceeded placement of 70 or greater, all at a 90% certification rate. So we're very pleased with what we continue to do under the Iwt program, the WashU. Straight Up Solar is another Iwt partnership that has recently shared with us that 8 of the 9 individuals in that 6-month training program has received their certification, and they're moving on to greater pay and a higher position. And now we have a third Iwt in the Machine Center that's scheduled to start later this month, and I'll share more information with you guys with that. So what I'm hoping to share with you is that we're growing under Iwt, we're growing under MA, and I'm very proud again of Mr. Harold Pierce with the Construction Expo being the point of contact, and Mr. Brian Brandon. So that concludes my report. I hope I wasn't too long-winded, and everyone have a super weekend.
Well, thank you, Derek, and I'm going to keep you here for a second. So let me ask you a quick follow-up question. What is IWT again, just as a reminder for our committee members and
That's
and
great.
staff? Yep.
Incumbent worker training. What it does, it allows individuals that are currently employed at a particular site to have an opportunity to receive an enhanced skill that would allow them to receive a pay increase and an additional certification. And also, it should put them in a position where they're more valuable and essential to the employer and avoid layoffs. At the same time, any positions that are vacated from the newly placed IWT promotional folks, we look to backfill that. So simply put, Greg, it's a worker currently employed looking for an opportunity to enhance their skill set with greater pay and a certification.
Yep, and I think that's important to highlight as one of our key programs now, because as employers continue to struggle with finding workers, and they're looking to fill their talent needs, reskilling is a critical strategy, and more employers are looking at how they can reskill their workforce, how they can take those talented entry-level employees and move them into upper-level positions that really develop the talent that they have in-house. And so our workforce board is really an instrument to assist with that. You've heard a lot about the WashU medical assistant incumbent worker training program, but what Derek was just sharing was kind of an advancement from that previous partnership, looking at new opportunities to work with employers. And it's exciting to have an organization that deals with solar installation panels, because we know the energy economy is one that you're also going to see more investment in. If you've been following some of the national dialogue around climate change and needing to invest more into green friendly practices, I think that there's going to be some money available in the infrastructure bill that also can support that locally. And so partnering to really be on the cutting edge of that energy economy too, and looking at how we're innovative in our partnerships is important. So thanks for that note, Derek. And then the Construction Expo, just want to say that think there's a lot of opportunity if you have networks and obviously your own organizations, you want to share information about that event. Derek, could you send maybe after this meeting? I'm not sure, maybe it's in your report. I didn't look closely to see if you had a link to the flyer for the event, but maybe we could share with Cinia, Vanessa, and Jason the information about that event so that they can distribute too among their networks.
Will do, sir.
Hey, Greg, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
perfect. Now everyone can hear me. Wonderful. Good afternoon. A couple of things. Hey, so from a sharing of the network, I think it would be advantageous if we all commit to sharing it on our LinkedIn platform as well, because that kind of drives messaging. And secondarily, I wanted to ask about partnerships. Are we open to partnerships like with the Lighthouse for the Blind? They are a manufacturing facility and they have open positions and they're looking for people. I know that they typically employ low vision or legally blind individuals. However, we don't know where someone is in that journey, and they may actually be or walk through the doors of workforce development. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there to see if that's a possible partnership that could be established.
I would say yes, and if you wouldn't mind sharing any contact information or point us in a direction where we could reach out, that would be appreciated. I think that is a good opportunity.
Yes, and I'm looking through the lens of being inclusive in the approach, to not make sure that kind of looking at all employees or all those who are looking for employment. I think that would be a great add, inclusivity.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. And we'll second that motion to share on our LinkedIn pages too. I think that's a great way to help us get the word out. I think there's been a number of different ways that we've been getting the word out for this event so far, and continuously trying some new ways to see what has the most effect in terms of driving turnout. the better. So, and Derek, I think, did we see, you looked at the, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I know you looked at how folks heard about the last event. Was a lot of our traffic driven by social media, or was it kind of a split between a variety of different ways that we did outreach? Do you remember?
Well, to be totally frank, it seemed as if the job seekers that were in attendance that particular day were aggressively or assertively sought after by staff in-house. I would say close to half happened to come here for other resources, other needs, and we informed them about this, and they came in to take a look at opportunities. The remaining half were directed to us via social media or some of the external partners that we have, such as, again, Job Corps and STLU and others.
Great. Well, let's keep trying some new approaches, and Vanessa, appreciate if you and other committee members would be willing to share that. I think that will help us get the word out. So thank you.
Greg, this is Tina. I look forward to receiving the flyer and information, and certainly we will share it broadly.
Thank you. Okay, well, that's really the updates that I wanted to share with the committee today. There's you'll get more updates as we go through this agenda, because there's a number of items that we want to bring to your attention that we'll be asking the board to vote on and support. So we'll just keep moving through the agenda. And I know we have some of our friends from the fiscal unit with us today. We have Ann Agnew, I think, and Chris Horn, it looks like. So I'm going to go, well, I, for whatever reason, I'm not sure why, I can't seem to share the expenditure report. I can't share anything on my screen, but it's just not showing that I have the ability to pull up one of those files. So I think you have in your packet, the WIOA expenditure report that includes funds for PY20, PY21, and PY 2022. I think, you know, if you had, do members have any questions about that overall report in your board packet on just the WIOA funds first? Or Ann, I think maybe it would be good. Do you have anything that you want to highlight for us as we review that? Looks like some of us are getting our packets to look at.
Just for your information, the first page with the formula funds is on page 12, and the supplemental funds is on page 13. The PY20, FY21 youth, it lists as being underspent. It was actually fully spent, but some payments were coded on our general ledger to the wrong fund, and we need to complete the reconciliation of that. So
okay.
that's a project that Chris and I are working to get cleaned up.
And this is under which funds were those again? And
that's the PY20, FY21 youth. Some of their payments were coded to PY21 in the last fiscal quarter, and we need to get those moved to the correct year to use it up. Yeah. But it was actually spent.
Okay, and that's an important note, because I was wondering when the PY20 funds were listed on this report, you know, the relevance of that, given that those funds were to be expended by June 30th of 2022. But you just clarified that the funds that it shows that are remaining have actually been spent. It's just an issue of reconciling within the internal processes, the books, to make sure that that's reflected. Okay.
Yes, we made a mistake in coding the payments, and we just need to correct that and put it to the proper fund.
Okay.
But they were spent within the program period. We just coded them to a later year by mistake, and we just need to correct that.
Mm-hmm. And so we'll assume that by the time we get to the board meeting, that will be adjusted, and
yes,
and likely if we include those PY20 funds, we'll just make sure that we have that completed. Okay.
And
go ahead, Ann.
On the PY22 in council, we got an update on the county council meeting, and they are at the perfection level of approval in county council. So one more round of approval and then finalization with the executive office.
Yep. Okay, great, Ann. So if you look at our PY21, that funds, that's where a lot of our spending is occurring right now. And again, we have up until June of 2023 to expend those funds. We're at about, according to the report, we're at around 34% for adult, 20% for youth, and just under 20% for dislocated worker. We have talked about the challenge with our dislocated worker spending in the past, and that's an area that we want to continue to focus on. We've been seeing an increased demand in ITA funds, which, remember, again, those are the individual tuition account funds, the training account funds. These are the funds that we use for tuition for our training programs. We see more adults utilizing those funds than dislocated workers. So one thing that we're going to recommend to the board that I'm just presenting to the committee here is that we do make a fund transfer from the dislocated worker program to the adult program, and we'll make that request that we transfer up to just shy of 20% of the total funds for those programs. So that's something that's allowable based on WIOA regulations and state policy. If you exceed 20% of funds in terms of your transfer, you have to undergo a local plan modification process. And so we think that by making it under 20%, but close to 20%, we'll have sufficient funds to be able to just transfer over to support the demand for the adult ITAs, and not need to do a local plan modification, which requires a number of other steps and documentation that we don't think is necessarily needed. So that we've asked the board to approve fund transfers before, so it's not new, and it's not a new policy. It's always been available to us. And I think given the labor market conditions and what we're seeing, there's reason to do that. So that's one thing that we just wanted to make sure that we flag for the committee, but that again will be shared with the full board at the later August meeting. So any questions on the WIOA expenditures, the formula expenditures, and the point I just made about fund transfer? Okay, well, if there are none, then the next set of funds that we'll review quickly is the we always call it other program expenditures. And is there anything that you think we need to draw to the attention of the committee members here, or do you think it's pretty straightforward?
This is fairly straightforward. 3 of the programs ended the replacement. They have replacement programs whose approval is pending in council. We just got award numbers from the state in July for the new TANF Skill Up FNS and Skill Up TANF. So we don't really have much else to note about this.
Okay, one thing, Ann, I want to just kind of, as I'm looking at this, and other committee members might have questions about, is it has a start, for the Equal Opportunity Officer Fund, the WIOA Equal Opportunity Fund, as well as the TANF Jobs League Fund. It has us as having an end date of June 30th, 2022, and it shows that we are close to 80% of those funds expended. Can you maybe explain that a little bit? Do we still have more spending to do, or were there extensions given that allow us to spend more there? Do you feel like the remainder of those funds are simply going to be recouped in some way by the state or transferred to another program?
I'm going to have to ask Chris to address that. I have not really done much with those funds.
Okay, Chris, if you have any insight for committee members on that. We can't hear you, Chris, by the way, if you're talking.
He's on mute. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now, Greg?
Yes.
And can you ask your question again, Greg?
Yep. So in looking at the fiscal report under other program expenditures, there's two funds in the top under the account description: the Equal Opportunity Officer Fund as well as the TANF Jobs League Fund. They both begin July 1st of 2021, but they expire June 30th of 2022. And it's showing that 79% of the funds for equal opportunity have been used, and only 76.6% of the TANF Jobs League have been used. And again, it seems that we've reached the end date. So just want the committee members to know what happens to the funds, or maybe give us kind of some information about those two funds in particular.
I really believe that the remainder of those two funds be recouped by the state. I don't think they'll be transferred over to the newer funds. I think it's the use it or lose it type of idea, and unfortunately, I think the state will recoup those.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that committee members had an understanding of that, because it looks, when you have it ending, but then you still have some funds to use, what are the next steps there? So I think what we'll need to do is put together, a strategy. When we talk to the board at the end of August, we'll talk about some of the ways that we'll make sure that we improve our ability to spend these funds, because we certainly don't want to leave any money on the table. And don't want to have to return funds if it's not necessary. So I think with the Jobs League and the TANF Skill-Up programs, those are programs that are administered by our subrecipients. So we need to provide the oversight necessary to get those funds, encourage them to best utilize those funds, and then look at where there's needs within the EO function that can allow us to spend those funds more effectively as well. But we'll anticipate that our board will have questions about that as well, and I think we should be prepared to have a strategy outlined for those two. And it looks like we have increased our expenditures in the COVID-19 Humanitarian Grant. This is again that grant that we've talked about in the past around expenditures and needing to expend more there. So we now have that extension that this board approved, that the committee reviewed a strategy for last meeting, that we think will help us expend faster and enable us to fully expend those funds, so that we don't leave any more money on the table for the COVID grant. And we'll talk a little bit too about a reallocation that is occurring within the state around our budget and other budgets that impacts kind of what the levels of funding that we have for that are. But we are at now 43.5% expended, whereas I think the last meeting that we had, we were more like 30%, just over 30%. So there is an increase there. We are going to look at pushing more individuals, or I shouldn't say pushing more individuals into training. We see folks demanding training. We're going to be looking at deploying more of our funds to support those enrolling in training programs. And then we continue to support 6 to 7 individuals who are enrolled in our temporary employment program. So getting wages on a weekly or biweekly basis to do the sanitization work. And so that continues. We haven't had any new enrollments in that program since this last meeting, to my knowledge. But we will be, like I said, as we work with the state on the modifying the scope of work and the budget for that program, we're going to put more of our target enrollments into that training side. And we discussed this before. I'm just reminding folks what that COVID-19 Humanitarian Grant is. So any questions about this other program expenditures report? Okay, well, if not, then we'll proceed down the agenda to item 6.3. Thank you to the fiscal team for your commentary there, by the way. We'll talk about the PY20 WIOA supplemental funding. We received at the end of June a notice of obligation, and so we provided that within the agenda that you can review. awarding St. Louis County $18,000 to spend on participant costs. And so we could have used that to purchase technology resources or hotspots. That's how other boards were using those funds, or use at our discretion. But unfortunately, the state gave us a 48-hour turnaround to spend those funds. And the state realized that they had those funds remaining and needed to expend them by the end of June. So they then reallocated them to the boards and said, go ahead and here's a gift at the end of the program year to spend on within certain parameters on direct participants. We have a process challenge. I don't necessarily want to call it a problem, but a challenge where, it takes us 6 to 8 weeks for our county legislation to ultimately authorize us to receive funds. And so one thing that we've done to address this issue, because it's been ongoing, we've seen this a couple of years now in a row. We had this happen in PY20 as well, in June of 2020, when the state said you have 30 days to spend this allocation of $100,000 to support training opportunities. And we were able to get it started through the process of the county legislation, but we could not get authorized through an ordinance to be able to receive and spend that money. And so what we've done this time is we've made sure that language was attached or inserted that relates to receiving supplemental funding throughout the course of a program year. So the current legislation that's moving through the council that Ann mentioned earlier, that's the request for legislation to receive our PY 2022 formula funds. We now included language that allows us to also, if the council approves it, also allows us to receive and spend funds that that occur throughout the program year. So we wouldn't be in the situation again where we receive funds and then have to go through county council again. So the idea is that they will approve up to $250,000 that we could spend that's considered supplemental funds that would occur throughout the program year. So again, if we're in this scenario next year, if the council fully approves it, we're crossing our fingers there. We'll know that in the next couple of weeks. If they approve that, then next time the state gives us extra money that's related to the purpose of that program year's funds, we will have the ability to spend it without going through the county council process to be authorized to do so. So that's a win and an achievement. Loris was speaking with our county councilor's office to get that change added as well. So that's, I just wanted to update you that the update here for the financial report is we thought it was important to notify the board that we received these funds, but we had to pass on the opportunity to spend these funds. But to also present that solution that moving forward, we're going to have a new way of being able to address that if the county council approves it. And I'll still make sure that that's conditional up until maybe when we get to the board meeting, we'll be able to say that it's final. But right now it's still pending. Any questions about that? Okay, so then the next item is COVID-19 Humanitarian Grant Fund deobligation. We also don't like to see that deobligation comment in anything that we do either. But the state of Missouri, as they've extended that grant for another year, has looked at the budget overall for regions across Missouri. And there's a couple regions that fully expended their allocation the past 2 years, and these were much smaller regions. We had a much higher allocation than most regions. So these are regions that instead of having $165,000 to spend, they may have only been allocated $30,000 or $40,000 to spend. So there's a region or two that needed more funds to continue participating. So the state has asked us to be willing to deobligate to $29,000 of funds from our current budget to assist those other regions in being able to continue to participate in the grant. And of course, as part of that, they noted that we need to work on improving our expenditures. And so this is to make sure that they don't just have the money sitting with us and not being spent yet. Now they know that we have a strategy for spending our funds and that we are looking at some new ways to improve our enrollments and those expenditures. And what they've noted to us is that if we're ever in a position where we need more money to accomplish our enrollment targets, the state would always be open to us making that request to have funds redistributed to us in the event that another region is not spending their money. So It has happened the last 2 years, of this grant, where there's other regions also like St. Louis County that had trouble expending their funds. And so we could receive those $29,000 back if we actually need it to accomplish our goals. And so we're going to monitor our expenditures. We're going to monitor the enrollments, and we'll make a decision when we get to that point about submitting a formal request in writing to receive the funds to allocate. But for the short term, this was a way of ensuring that other regions in the state of Missouri that didn't have any money to continue participating were able to participate and serve more of Missouri's residents overall. So what we're really doing is notifying. We're not really asking the board to vote on this. We're just notifying the board that will be part of our budget and scope of modification adjustment that we're doing with the state on the COVID-19 grant. And so it will shrink our budget, but it won't significantly impact our current enrollments, because we have the ability to decide how much money we want to use for things like training and for that temporary employment assistance. The only thing that I think gives me pause is if we get to a situation where we still have temporary, employees who are still employed by the grant, and we have to tell them that they're going to have to end their employment opportunity because we don't have enough money. But we're not at that point yet where we would have to say that. So once as we monitor and as we get close to looking at that, that's when we would want to make sure that we make that request to the state if we see that there's a need. Because others might complete the program, they might end their temporary employment opportunity. We've already seen that with a couple participants so far. So hopefully the goal is really to get them into permanent employment. So this temporary employment should be a transition to permanent anyway, where we wouldn't need those funds to continue to subsidize or supplement their income because they've been able to obtain a permanent position. So, but we'll, like I said, evaluate that when we get there. Any questions or concerns about that update?
So Greg, just want to make sure I'm clear. Should the opportunity arise, we can go back to the state to, I don't know if renegotiate is the right reference, but that 29,000, if we see that it would impact our delivery and our business in our region, that we can go back and say that we need those funds, or do we need to make that transition now, so to speak, and then have a discussion with the state later if we have an opportunity? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does.
Okay.
It does. So the only thing that we have to do is submit a written request to OWD to say that we would like more funding to support our goals. The position that we're in currently, though, with only 40% expended, is that it's harder to make that argument that there's a need right at this moment, right? So we have to be in that situation where we're maybe closer to 60 to 70% expended and say, looking out, we still have several folks who are going to need to continue working in these positions. We still have to cover the cost of training for 5 participants, and that's going to cost this much money. And when you look at our current budget, we don't have sufficient funds to do that. And then we make that argument at that time. But I think to your point, Cinia, we don't really want to wait to get to the last minute or even in the final quarter to be able to make that request because it takes some time to get that process in place where we can get those funds reallocated. And so as we work with our subrecipient on the budget modification that we're doing right now, and that we should have finalized for the board at the August meeting, we should be able to look at what our projected needs are going to be and have a good sense of when that timing is where we have to make that request again. And so we might make sure that when we're presenting to the board on this topic that we have a clearer sense of maybe when we would anticipate based on current trends that request would need to be made in this program year. And so we'll do that then rather than wait to kind of see where we are in January or February and say, oh, okay, we need to make that request now. We'll be proactive about that and then monitor where we are with actually spending in the way that our projections forecasted initially.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, The final items, and this is like I said, a very exhaustive financial report this time around. There's a lot of financial components for discussion this meeting and at our board meeting, but we will ask the board to vote on approving Jobs League and Skill Up programs. We receive these program funds every year. So these are the ones that we just talked about previously with the fiscal report. So you have in your packet the letters notifying us that we're awarded those funds. So this is just the formal process that we go through to have the board authorize us to implement those programs and receive those funds. And so are there any questions about the Skill Up or the Jobs League program? You all know those programs pretty well because we do them every year, but just wanted to make sure that we paused for that, see if there's any questions about those items.
The only question I have, and it's not those two items I was going down, when we have our full meeting, our full board meeting, we're going to vote on the 6.1, 6.2. We don't vote on 6.3 or 6.4, correct? Then we vote on 6.5 and 6.6.
We typically so let's just go down the line real quick. 6.1 and 6.2, we typically provide updates to the board on where our expenditures are. We don't ask them to vote on anything there. With the supplemental funding, which is 6.3, and the COVID-19 Humanitarian Grant 6.4, we're simply notifying the board of those realities and not necessarily asking them to vote on any of those items. The final items, 6.5 and 6.6, we will be asking board votes to approve those.
Okay, thanks.
Unless, Loris, keep me honest, did I misframe anything or miss anything there?
No, you're great. You're right.
Okay. But I will say, Jason, now that I just went through that and said, did I miss anything? I think, to your point, under the WIOA expenditures piece, I just noted a fund transfer request. We do have to get the board vote too.
I thought we had to vote on that.
That's probably what you were thinking of, yes.
Just short, right, because it's just short of the 20%. Okay, so yeah, we do. Okay.
But what I want to do for the board agenda is separate that item out from the WIOA expenditure report. So we'll have it as a separate item so that it's clear for the board that we have to vote on that. We don't just kind of say that while the fiscal team is presenting that financial report. We'll have that listed as a separate item. I just notified the board that, or this committee here, that we were in the process of developing that recommendation. But that will appear as a separate item for the board.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay, any final thoughts on the financial report? Questions, concerns? All right, then we can move to workforce development reports. Loris, I think you wrote a pretty exhaustive report under administration, which is 7.1. That's in your board packet, in your committee packet. Loris, did you want to hit any major highlights that you think are important for the committee right now today that we'll be talking to the board about? That's included in that report, but maybe not under new business, which I know there's an element there that you wrote about that we'll have to discuss, but anything that you would think we need to highlight?
I think the only thing that we need to highlight for me is the Workforce Development Board, actually, because of the openings that we have, and then we have the pending openings as well. I just wanted to make you all aware that I have talked to the state about that. They are aware of the status of our board. And I've also been notifying the county executive's office anytime we have an opening or a pending opening so that they can help us fill those positions. So as of right now, we are still in compliance and still approved to go ahead with board business because our makeup is, we have to have at least 51% of our members have to be businesses. So the most pending position that we have to fill is the higher education. That's the position that was left by Hart Nelson. Hart did give us the name of a potential person to take his place, but to date, that person has not filled out an application. I have been in contact with her via email, but again, to date, we have not had an application or anything from her. And in addition to that, I know Jason and Greg and I met with a person that Mr. Frederick recommended, Joshua Heap, who was with Boeing. I sent him the information on what he needed to do to be on the board. He sounded very interested, but to date, he has not filled out an application to my knowledge. And then we did send out information. And Jason, thank you for sending that that piece this morning I saw to Mr. Haskell. So there are a number of people that we've reached out to, but so far, no bites. So I am a little nervous about that piece. So if you all know of people that you want to recommend to the board, we have 5 openings and 3 pending. So 3 pending openings. So that's the only thing that I think I wanted to add, Greg.
Yep, that's a good point, and I can tell you that our board chair and Loris and I have been working to start processing what the needs are around those different vacancies and anticipating the 3 pending vacancies. So you're really looking at possibly 8 altogether, which is a substantial portion of our board. So we're going to need to get in. We're going to need to recruit members. We're going to need to be ensuring that we're in full compliance on that. And Vanessa, you've been very helpful in the past, and others have as well. And I know, Cindy, you lent your time to the nominating committee's work and recruiting, supporting our board chair selection. I think that, you know, we've had recommendations from this committee before. We need recommendations from the board as well. But we also already have some organizations in mind. We've reached out to a contact at BioSTL, for instance, to make a recommendation for a potential partner in Thermo Fisher, and that's Jason's. Jason's been pushing that one as he's also been working with BioSTL and Thermo Fisher on some projects, and we think that there's some good opportunity there to have representation from the bioscience space. We're also recently had Jason had a. You know what, Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you for a second on this, rather than tell the committee members what you've been working behind the scenes to start laying the foundation for. Go ahead.
So Patheon and Thermo Fisher, we thought would be a pretty good ad. They've got about 750 employees up in Berkeley, and they're doing another big project. The county, we have our organization did an abatement with them. BioSTL is doing a big training program with their parent company, Thermo Fisher, and so their Patheon, Thermo Fisher are real involved and engaged. And so we thought what a great board member ad it would be. So it's pharmaceutical manufacturing. They're involved with BioSTL, and they're involving the school district. So we really fingers crossed that we can get a good contact there. That's one though that I worked with a consultant, so I don't really have an inside path on that one. We have approached a company called Gateway Studios. That's the group that's building the $130 million music and movie studio out in Chesterfield. They do lights, sounds. They travel all over the United States and do entertainment and shows. So for a small business, we thought that would be a exciting one to put on and different for small business engagement. And then I've reaching out on an internal contact to find one at BJC, because we may lose one of our members that has a hospital ties. So I'm trying to find an internal at BJC for us to kind of do a hospital healthcare ad. And so that's the 3 that we've been talking about.
Yeah, and I think Loris did. I can't remember if you listed the different categories. That's always our issue with the board, is when we recruit, we can't just recruit anybody, right? We have certain requirements that we have to meet in terms of private sector representation, and then also having labor representation, higher education representation. So, Loris, I'm not looking at your report at the moment, but I can't remember if you outlined what those categories are. But if we didn't, we might want to, before we get to the board meeting, maybe have a slide or something that we can display the slide that shows the different categories that we're looking to fill, and that can maybe allow this committee and also the board to see where we're going to need to recruit some members.
Yeah, I can do that, Greg. Normally I keep it right in front of me, so I can pretty much tell you, but I will make sure that I put it in the report and line it out so everyone's aware of what positions. But right now it's two businesses. The actual openings are two businesses, two labor workforce, and then like I said, our higher education. And then the pending are all businesses, including one of our small businesses. So those positions are the ones we need to fill.
Hey,
And we did
Jason,
have,
I'm sorry.
oh, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Celia. We did have one person replaced. So the state, they removed Melissa Wokamp, but they put Jerry Bowles in her place. So they usually, just do it right away. So we did have one change that was not mentioned.
Cynthia, you had a question?
Yes, I was just going to share, Jason, I may be able to assist with BJC. So if you want to connect with me, I have a few names that I could refer unless you have, you have those leads.
No, I'd be glad to. I'm not going to reach out to anyone until we, go through Greg, department
Yeah.
director. I mean, I'm not going to get ahead of anything in the process, but I'm just thinking, yes. So I'll reach out to you if you want to provide some contacts, and then we can all backtrack and make sure we have the right person and then the right slot for what we have opening. But thank you.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's, I would need to understand that, but I do have some contacts there, so you can let me know.
Terrific. Yes. Thank you.
Yep. So I think Cindy, just getting some brainstorming around names and especially on those categories. And then we can look to narrow that down and do the outreach. Customarily in the past, when we recruited members, it would be myself, the board chair, Jason, and then Director Hayes to just have an initial interview with those candidates. We also encourage them, they have to apply on the county's boards and commissions website. So sometimes we get referrals from the county executive's office as well that gets sent to Loris, and that's happened a few times. But otherwise, we normally we get recommendations, or we do the proactive outreach. We meet with them, we encourage them to apply formally, and then we more or less then go through the process of getting them formally appointed. And I think, Vanessa, you at one of our executive committee meetings, either last year, maybe tail end of 2020, I can't remember. Now you recommended Quentin Henry and Lewis McKinney. Lewis McKinney ultimately stepped away because of a concern he had around conflict of interest, given some of the work he does. But those were both two really good recommendations. We did that interview. We had them go through the process, and Mr. Henry's now on our board. So it's helpful when we can get the referrals from committee members and board members as well.
Absolutely. If I heard you say higher education, and I don't know the other, but my wheels are turning as far as some referrals that I can get to you and kind of put that in bugs, put a bug in their ear for sure.
Yep, that's great. Well, like I said, we'll recap those vacancies based on category, and then we can help you with the thinking through of some names you might recommend.
Is banking and finance a separate category, or is that business?
It depends on their affiliation. Most of the times I think it'll be business though, because we don't have a standalone category for finance and banking.
I can tell the board now it's public. It went on the county council agenda today of the release. Working on a project for First Bank is building a $40 million brand new headquarters. And there's going to be 100 new jobs added, 750 consolidation of like hoteling brand new headquarters. And so that might not be a good add. I haven't done anything, but I'm just thinking out loud with you guys, and we can end that conversation now, but I'm just trying to think of our segments, like what's the segments?
I think that would count as a business.
And we always do double check too before we put them on the board, because we don't want to make sure that, you know, we don't have someone on the board, then they're told, OWD comes back and says, oh, we looked at your board and we can't certify it, or we can't, you know, approve of you designating this person in this category. So if it's fuzzy, we'll ask Jason and we'll make sure we get to the bottom. So
I don't want to do anything on that one yet. I'm just thinking out loud with everybody so that we can all kind of hear what we're kind of bouncing around, so that we have good active members in the community. I think we have a really good board. I'm really proud and excited. So we'll get these spots filled.
Right. And we also know our department director, Mr. Hayes, has a lot of engagement in the community, obviously. And of course, any recommendations you might have, or our deputy director, Mark Peoples, or staff, you know, can feel free to make recommendations as well. Once we have, again, that kind of outline for you all in terms of who we're looking to recruit. I think this is a team effort, and finding the right talented folks who can help us advance our mission. All right, well, that is, okay, so that is the note that, Loris, you wanted to highlight. We know there's another piece that you'll touch on as we move down the agenda into new business as well on the Oso Monitoring Report, but I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Manning in the compliance unit and to give us an update. And I know, Dr. Manning, you also have another portion down under new business around risk assessments. So we'll get to that point. But if you want to kind of highlight anything else related to compliance that you think is worth the committee members' attention right now, feel free.
Can I just say quickly that I just emailed everyone the grading criteria for the risk assessment. So if you all have an opportunity or access to get your email, the grading criteria for the risk assessment was sent to you.
Okay, Dr. Manning, is there anything that you want to share with us right now? Go ahead. I don't know if Dr. Manning is trying to unmute, but we cannot hear you, Dr. Manning.
I was trying to unmute, Greg. I'm multitasking, was sending an email while unmuting, guys, but here I am. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. In your packets, you'll find the risk assessments for our vendors for the PY21 program year. This assessment is the first time we're required to do this assessment per OWD. And as we were required to do one on our subrecipients, we will also be getting one as well from OWD. And we sent in the documentation for our board's risk assessment evaluation. I believe it was last week, Greg and Lois. Yeah, I believe we submitted it last week per the due date. But we haven't received the results of our board's risk assessment yet. But in your package, you'll see the risk assessment for our current 3 vendors. The grading criteria, the grading criteria that Loris just sent you guys will tell you why each one of these, the risk assessment, guys, in your packet is on pages 46. Wait a minute, let me, 40. Yes, it starts on page 46 in your packet. So it's at the back of your packet. What we did was based our risk assessments on 6 very key areas that will tell the board whether the subrecipient is at a low, moderate, or high risk assessment level. Mind you, we took our rating criteria straight from OWD. This is the same way. While the components of our rubric are a little different than the states because they do a little bit more. They included finance and programs with their risk assessments for us. This is the programmatic risk assessments for our subrecipients, if that makes sense. But we did adopt the grading criteria that the state follows as far as how many infractions means. As you can see, I don't know if you guys opened up your grading criteria, but it reads a little bit as follows. Risk ratings for each component are considered an average to determine an overall risk rating. The ratings are based on the number of infractions. If a vendor has 0 to 1.4 infractions, we consider them a low risk. Okay, they're doing a good deal at managing their contractual obligations. If they average 1.5 to 2.49 infractions, we consider it moderate. They had some infractions, but they were able to course correct. So we consider it moderate and believe that with technical assistance from the Workforce Development Board, they'll do okay. For 2.5 to 3 infractions, we consider that high because you would have had to do repetitive infractions in key areas to establish this risk assessment rating. Okay, so the first assessment you guys are looking at on page 46 is for Employment Connection. And Employment Connection was fairly a new vendor. Employment Connection came on at the height of the pandemic in PY21 when they received their contract with St. Louis County Workforce Development. In that first year, Employment Connection did prove to have difficulties in meeting some of the contractual obligations, and then too there were some infrastructure issues on St. Louis County's behalf that contributed to that slow start their first year of their 3-year contract. Now, this past year, which is PY21 was their second year, we were still in the pandemic, and it didn't shake out to the end of the pandemic, but what Employment Connection did show is their ability to course correct. They are now enrolling on a regular basis, and their enrollments continue to increase. Their partnerships in the community have brought great feedback to St. Louis County, and we've heard from individuals in the community how well they're doing and working with Employment Connection. So as you can see, Employment Connection was on one corrective action plan, and again, that corrective action plan was toward the end of their first year into PY21, where they were not meeting their enrollment numbers. Now, while they did not meet their enrollment numbers in PY21, they did an exceptional job of coming close with what I want to say. Their ability to follow technical assistance is awesome, and we can see that they take the technical assistance seriously and they apply it. And again, they course correct. So with that, Employment Connection did get a moderate rating. And the reason for the moderate and not low again is because of the corrective action that they had to be placed on and the fact that they did not meet their mandatory enrollment numbers per contract in PY21. Do you guys have any questions about Employment Connection or this risk assessment? All right. So we're going to move on. The next risk assessment you will see, you guys are here, right? I feel like I have to ask. Yes. This is really quiet. Can you guys hear me? Okay. 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 I just want to make sure.
You're loud and clear.
Okay. Good. Okay. Good deal. Okay. So the next risk assessment you will see is for our subrecipient, Family and Workforce Centers of America, FWCA. And for FWCA, they did get a rating of a high risk. There are several issues surrounding the partnership with Family and Workforce Centers of America, and and a lot of it, I believe, centers around performance, staff turnovers, and things like that. I don't believe it does. It actually does, and you can see it in the report. However, okay. So they did get a high risk. At the end of PY20, FWCA was put on a performance improvement plan for the same infractions and a couple more actually for the reasons for the PY21 PIP. So they ended in PY20 with the PIP, and now we have ended in PY21 with another PIP. The first PIP that they were placed on a PY20, yes, they did complete it successfully, and we thought we had turned a corner, but we had not. Some of the same issues and concerns after completing the PIP, you know, are still present, and now they're on another PIP for PY21. I don't know if we can included the PIP, and we did not include the PIP. We've given it to FWCA. They are aware that they're under this performance improvement plan. We didn't include it in this packet or anything like that. But as we move through this PIP, I can say that one of the infractions, which is attending regular conference calls for one of the grants we're on and submitted reports, is part of their PIP, and they have failed to do so the last couple of times, and we're currently in discussions about that. Their staff turnovers, they currently don't have staff to operate their out-of-school youth program or their in-school youth program. They have had staff turnovers at least 3 times this year. I believe it's more, but the 3 times this year are what I'm aware of, and it has affected their ability to meet their contractual applications. They have the RFP for the one-stop operator contract. Their one-stop operator retired, and they have not replaced anyone in the center, but they have hired someone. But we have gone over a month, almost a month and a half, I believe, Greg. It's going on 2 months without a one-stop operator in place. Again, staff turnover and positions are still being filled. They are at our last partner meeting last Friday. They did inform us that they are in the process of conducting interviews, and they do plan on having staff in place soon. They are not meeting their enrollment numbers for youth, in-school youth or out-of-school youth, but they did meet them for the Adult Dislocated Worker Program, which is our occupational training program, which FWCA staff does very well in. We are very strong in our skills training section. Staff disciplinary actions. I charted 2, and this is based on complaints to the division director. Has it been successfully completed? It has not, because again, I want to bring up the fact that the PIP that they are currently under, one of the things that is stipulated is that timely responses and reports be submitted in that timely manner. Again, I'm currently having an issue with receiving a report that has been requested several times and is a part of their PIP. So, and the particular person in question, one of these disciplinary actions do belong to them. Okay. And so with that being said, Family and Workforce Centers of America, the risk assessment for PY21 is high. Any questions or comments on that information, everyone? All right, I'll move down to International Institute of St. Louis. Now, we had a very interesting and informative meeting with Blake Hamilton Monday, right? Partners meeting was this week, okay? And Blake did inform us of the different issues they're still facing with recruitment, what they actually offer their targeted population, and then what they're being assessed for. And so on our last committee call, we did have a discussion about the fact that International Institute, you know, were having issues reaching their targeted population and things like that. Their staff turnover, number of infractions, and staff shows cover. It should have been 6. I don't know. It says yes, that should have been 6. But however, at one point, we mentioned that at the last committee meeting, their whole staff that we had trained had resigned within 90 days later. They've added since that time, and since Chelsea left, they've got one case manager who is new, Comey. We've had training with Comey twice now, to train Comey up in WIOA enrollments. Now, what we found in talking to Blake is that it may not be truly beneficial for his organization's performance to be based on WIOA enrollments. And this is because most of International Institute enrollments come from Wagner-Peiser enrollments now. And again, Wagner-Peiser guys are those services that are not necessarily considered staff-assisted services, and they never get enrolled in WIOA, okay? They are the basic career services, because what International Institute works, they work hard to employ the population they serve. And so he even went as far as to explain how even if they came to us from training with that English barrier being present, a lot of the trainings that we provide, if there's not an interpreter and things like that, his targeted population wouldn't be able to participate in them. So it's a little thicker, of a challenge for Blake and his team versus our other sub-recipients. And again, it's because of the individuals that they serve. So we're wrapping our heads around maybe updating their contractual obligations to truly reflect the services that they offer, so we wouldn't put necessarily a certain number on their WIOA enrollments and focus on what they are doing and base our outcomes, our contractual obligations on that. So that is what we're discussing and we're kind of moving towards. Any questions about that? So for that reason, the reason they're getting a high risk assessment is because, again, they had no WIO enrollments for PY21, only Wagner-Peiser job placement, and they have had ongoing recruitment issues for their targeted population. And so another reason is high, because when you have a high risk assessment, that means that we have to figure out and do something to course correct. We cannot keep going and basing it on the fact that it's hard to reach that targeted population. We have to rethink the blueprint and devise another plan. Do you guys have any questions about that? All right.
Dr. Manning, thank you. I don't have questions about what your report, but I do have questions about, but I think it falls in the next order of business. So, but it's going to be what you just said. So maybe I'll wait till we go to the next order of business.
Gotcha. I'm waiting on you, Jason. I think that concludes my portion of the compliance update. Greg, is the main thing was the risk assessments. I do want to also let you guys know that the Programmatic Monitoring Report for PY21, our response to the state was submitted by the due date, and we are currently waiting to hear back on their determination. And once we receive that determination, those findings and information will be shared with you as well. I believe that's all I have, Greg, if no one has any questions.
Okay, one question I have, Dr. Manning. Thanks for that very thorough overview and explanation. When we look at the risk assessment component, why is it that OWD has kind of put in this policy now with their sub-state monitoring policy around risk assessments? Can you maybe give us some insight in terms of this? Because this is something that I don't think committee members have seen before, or that the board has probably processed before. Can you maybe give us some background around the rationale behind the policy?
Absolutely, absolutely. So with Department of Labor, with Department of Labor updates, came the mandatory risk assessment for the different states. So it rolled down on a federal level, and they require the states now to do risk assessments. While we knew this was coming, I say about 2 years ago, we knew it was coming, and they released information in the sub-state monitoring policy, but they also gave a grace period because the state needed to invent their risk assessment process, right? Because it's new for everyone. And so the state released their process for that, and that's when St. Louis County implemented their process, because again, it's mandatory per the state. And this is another way to hold the states responsible for different findings that DOL have found when auditing workforce development. And for the state, it's a way to hold the different regions responsible for the funding that is allocated. You know, we're charged with being good stewards. And again, so it just goes level to level. So what this does for the St. Louis County Workforce Development Board is it holds us more accountable for the fact that we must hold our subrecipients accountable for their performance. A lot of time we have conversations, or we can put them on performance improvement plans, and we can do these corrective action plans, and it'll seem that things are turning around, but then when you turn the corner, we're right back where we are. We need to have a firewall or a level of protection that shows we are doing our due diligence to ensure that we are holding our subrecipients accountable. So this risk assessment is just another layer of protection for the board to ensure that we are being good stewards of what the state expects us to oversee. Does that make sense, or did that answer it, Greg? Or
I think so. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we provide that context. I see Vanessa, were you trying to say something?
I was. Not only that, Dr. Manning, but I think when we're holding people accountable, they need to understand what they're being held accountable to. So I think that this risk assessment is ideal, because then the contractors know what's expected of them. That's important, so you can perform. I love this. I love this framework. I love this rubric, and I love the risk assessment. I love it.
Absolutely, Vanessa. And I actually created it that way because to be honest with you, it's while there's a lot of qualitative information that goes into explaining why they met this particular risk rating, we were able to formulate it on a quantitative format. There's no disputing this, you know. You did have 2 performance improvement plans. You did not reach your numbers. You know what I mean? You did have these staff turnovers. So it's very to the point. And I believe that, well, I do hope that our subrecipients take this as a way for us to kind of work together to, again, course correct, because what we cannot do is continue to let some of these infractions incur with no penalties, you know, or no sanctions or anything like that. So thank you for that, Vanessa, because that's one thing I find in this position is, you know, I never want to come across as punitive. I always want to come across as we're presenting this so that, you know, come on, now what do we need to do to make this better? You know, I consider us and our subrecipients and the state of Missouri a team, and we have to operate as such. Thank you for that, Vanessa.
Oh, my pleasure. And you also have on here successful completion, so there's a balance there. We have to celebrate where people are completing, right?
Absolutely.
So I think it's a balanced approach. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I would say that the other question that committee members might have too, and the board would want to know is what are we doing about this, right? What are we doing to mitigate the risk? And I know, Dr. Manning, you did a pretty good job of outlining some of the measures that have been taken thus far. But I think since this is the first time that we're performing this kind of risk assessment, what we're also going to do is have our subrecipients, when we look at our renewal contract, to account for whatever is needed in terms of improvements. As Dr. Manning noted, we did have a conversation around the staffing turnover with FWCA and especially with the youth program, because that is something that we know needs to be addressed as we move forward. We did have the discussion with International Institute as well around staffing. Some of those are organizational, having their staff turnover and then needing to recruit. We've seen that be a common issue that's affecting, whether or not then their staff knows how to upload appropriate and effective case notes and do training justifications well. And I'm not going to get in the weeds on all the different things that Dr. Manning and her team have to look at on a regular basis. But when we see sometimes if St. Louis County gets a report that says, we have some concerns around some of these errors, it can be attributed to staff turnover. So that's a key issue. And looking at I think there's also a role that the board needs to play in board staff for ongoing training and support, technical assistance as needed to address some of these things. But the PIPs are good instruments as we move forward. We're going to ask our subrecipients to account for the concerns that we've expressed through this risk assessment. The key is putting the facts on the table so the board can do its job to be the oversight that it needs to be. And then ultimately, this enables us to be a stronger board. It enables us to have a better position as we work to be the best board, as I know Director Hayes and Jason has said to me. How do we make St. Louis County the best premier agency for workforce development? This is really about continuous improvement. And as Dr. Manning notes, they're going to be looking at a risk assessment for our board. And a lot of what they look at is some of these issues that ultimately are executed and administered by our subrecipients. So it's incumbent upon us to take seriously the risk assessment, this policy that's been implemented now, and the risk assessment component. We look at what our expectations, to your point, Vanessa, what are our expectations? And then how do we measure and track that progress, not at the end of a program year and not even at a quarter, but on an ongoing basis, because it's about continuous improvement fundamentally. And so we'll use this tool as kind of the anchor for looking at what we need from the subrecipients and having those discussions as we negotiate new contracts with them. But then ultimately on a monthly basis, it'll be on Dr. Manning and the team, myself, to really measure that progress and ensure continuous growth and performance improvement overall. So I just wanted to add that piece as we kind of tie that up. Any other questions or thoughts on this before we move to the next item? Okay, well, I think, Derek, you've already provided an update to us on the Construction Expo event in Straight Up Solar. I think the rest of his updates you can see in the board packet, unless, Derek, there's something else that you want to highlight. But do you feel comfortable with the update that you've already provided?
Yes, sir. Very much so.
Okay, great. The EO report is the next item, and we have Michelle Patterson with us to address any updates from our EO officer. Angela was not able to join us due to some technical difficulties, it looks like. So Michelle, you want to give us a quick update that Angela has for us?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. The 2022 EO Summit is open to all WIB members, managers, directors, or other staff that would be interested. We are looking for sponsors for this summit as well. If they have any ideas, that's welcome. That is November 16th through the 18th, and that is in Kansas City. And Angela is working with Danielle to do a training for all board members. It is a detailed training on the functions EO under the section 188. And that is all that I have, Greg.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. That was
You're
efficient.
welcome.
Any questions about Michelle's update? All right. The customer feedback, we always include this. This is a requirement that we make sure that we always provide the committee and the board updated information on customer feedback, and that is always measured by our JSSI survey data that we administer in the Job Center. So you have that report in your board packet. As it seems as usual, customers tend to find good service from our frontline staff and their experience at the Job Center. Those who complete the survey, we're looking at those completion rates, and St. Louis County actually has a high number compared to other regions, but we will want to make sure that we fully capture the numbers of people who come into our center. And so we'll continue to get more completions and get more data points. But you see, if you look at that survey, that there are some significant needs still for services that I've already mentioned. UI support, for instance. A lot of the folks that are coming in are being referred for enrollment into training, and those providers are referring those individuals to come into our center. And so there's no other major insights, I think, that I had when I looked at the survey data. Again, overall level of satisfaction of those who completed the survey is pretty high. And we don't see any immediate needs from this last survey that we have to address. But a lot of folks, you say notice to appear or proof of identity, they're coming to finish required processes that they need. But then they also get exposed to a number of other services that we offer in the Job Center. So that's really, any questions about customer feedback or that report that you see in your board packet around customer feedback? I did note, Vanessa, that looks like Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter are all sources of how folks learn about the Job Center. So going back to your previous point of how do they hear about our hiring events? Maybe we should post on LinkedIn. Obviously, that's at least a component. It's less than Facebook and Twitter, but it's still a component of what drives people to the center. But most commonly, it's the word of mouth, it looks like, from family and friends and school programs, and then ultimately required to appear for their unemployment claim. Okay, well, we're approaching 4:13. I think we're going to make it in time to wrap up by 4:30 on a Friday. Thank you all for staying with us through this afternoon here. Just a few more items. Under old business, there's nominating officers and standing committees. We always reserve that standing committees section just to have any updates on standing committees. The nominating officers, we've asked our board to provide us names of recommendations for 3 vacancies that we have in our executive committee currently. And those are the vice chair, the parliamentarian, and the treasurer. And so while we're looking to fill board member positions, we also have these vacancies. We mentioned it at the last board meeting to submit recommendations or nominations for officers or to opt in themselves and let us know if they were interested. I have not seen any interest expressed to us yet. Loris, has anybody sent you any notes by the deadline we gave them of today to submit their names for consideration?
No, I haven't received anything. Haven't received anything today.
Okay, so what I think our strategy needs to be here is recruitment. So I think we need to reach out and think about some folks that we might on our board currently who might be good fits for these roles, and then invite those members by outreach. You know, we've sent we sent a reminder before this meeting to submit their names. We know everybody's busy, but we'd love to have a full executive committee as well. I know that when I first started, we had at least 4 of us on this committee, I believe, consistently. So we want to, in that parliamentarian role, that person would be able to answer the question that Jason posed in the beginning of the meeting around, am I allowed to make a second, for that motion? I think that those kinds of questions, we want to have somebody. We have our friends from the county counselor's office here, Mac, who can always help us with that too. But that is a formal role that we have in our bylaws around parliamentary procedure here. So we want to make sure that we get that position, and then the treasurer. And then we need somebody in the event that our board chair has to step away. The vice chair's role is to step in and preside over meetings. So that's another position that we need to fill, and that has to be a business representative. So that's the only real stipulation on that particular committee member that we need to adhere to. So I have some thoughts on who could be good fits. I think what I'll do is I'll submit that to this committee, names that I think could be some good fits. I would open it to you all too to recommend or think about members of our current board who might be a good fit for the executive committee based on those roles. And you've seen those roles, I think, in the email that Laura sent out. We kind of listed those out, so you know what the roles are and what some of the expectations are. But would love your input. If you have any recommendations and you'd like to make a soft outreach to an individual that you might be close to that you think could be a good fit, let's talk about that. Or like I said, I or Jason can reach out and invite members to consider being an officer, and would love to, by the time we get to our board meeting, have some options for consideration for those officers. Any questions on that? That's the only item that I had under nominating officers. Okay, and then under standing committees, I have no real updates on standing committees. Our youth committee met yesterday, so we'll see the meeting minutes for that and understand kind of the content for that discussion that we can possibly share highlights of if there's things that are noteworthy that we want to share with the board. By that meeting, I know Angela's been working with Lydia Mitchell on the Disability Resource Committee and staffing that, but I have no other major updates on standing committees at the moment. If there's no questions on that, we can move to new business, but if there are questions, I'll take them. Okay, well, we have 3 items in new business. One of those items was already extensively covered by Dr. Manning. She kind of tied in her compliance report, this component around the risk assessment. So that's 9.2. So I don't think need any further discussion on that. So let's focus on the first one in order of operations here, 9.1 Oso Monitoring Report. Loris, do you want to say anything about that? I can talk through it if you prefer me to as well. Just let me know.
It would probably be helpful, Gray, if you would talk through it. Thank you.
Okay. Loris is a little bit under the weather, as you can tell, and is doing her best to stay focused and help us continue to get through this meeting. So appreciate you, Loris. But I'll just say quickly, the OSO Monitoring Report is also kind of a relatively new requirement that the state has made sure that the board adheres to, which is to make sure, just like we just did risk assessments for our subrecipients overall, they want extensive monitoring of our one-stop operator. And so you have the report in your board packet there for our OSO monitoring, and that is something that we're required to do every year, just once. I think it's good practice to have ongoing conversations with the one-stop operator, but the main thing is to kind of look at where there's areas for growth, but also highlight promising practices. And so that report that you see does include promising practices as well as areas that we want to see further improvement of our one-stop operator. Most of the areas for improvement center around continuing to maintain the firewall or conflict of interest requirement. We know that our service provider, FWCA, holds many contracts, and so there's a higher risk for that one-stop operator to have a conflict of interest in especially getting things done through the job center when they also report organizationally to the CEO that manages other and the organization that manages other service provider contracts. So we have a firewall agreement in place. We have a multifunction agreement that's been signed, but we need ongoing vigilance on that issue and making sure that we mitigate any kind of conflict of interest. This new staff member is new to FWCA, and we think that might bring some level of less blurred lines or less fuzziness as it relates to potential conflicts of interest. But that's something for us to continue to monitor. We want to see more engagement of our WIOA required partners, and those are the folks like Sydney. I know you're one of the signatories of our MOU process that Loris initiates. So we have all these partners that enter into an MOU with us, and our one-stop operator has disseminated information to those partners before. But I think as we look forward, we want to make sure that we also are actively looking at ways that we can better leverage the partnerships that we have that are part of our one-stop system. What that could look like is making sure, for instance, that some of those referral processes and resources that our MOU required partners commit to in their MOU, we actually bring more of those services into the job center itself. And so we're going to charge our one-stop operator with doing more of that intentional strategy building with our WEO required partners, and actually looking at how we best leverage those services rather than just simply share information. So that was a point that we wanted to kind of call out as well. And then overall, looking at how we continue to make sure that communication among all staff and all partners that are within our one-stop center is strengthened is kind of the other key area. So this one-stop monitoring, we submit to the state as part of a compliance requirement. But the other piece of this is we're going to use this to kind of help scope out what Kelly's, as a new one-stop operator, what her kind of charge will be. And we'll share this with her, and Carolyn's already seen it. And they'll use that to kind of map out what their next steps could look like in terms of key areas of focus for the one-stop operator. Any question on the monitoring or how we're going to use that tool moving forward?
Greg, if I may add something to that, one of the other things that we are in the process of doing is developing a one-stop onboarding for our one-stop operators, so that and this document and this criteria will be used in that process to let her know exactly the things that we will be looking at and what is expected of her. So this should not be a surprise to her. All of the elements of this monitoring were taken from the one-stop operator contract, also from the one-stop operator agreement and the multifunction agency agreement. So all of those things combined have helped us create this document, and we will then in turn use this to help train her on exactly what our expectations are, which is something that we did not have an opportunity to do with our previous one-stop operator.
Yep, thanks for that, Loris. It's good insight. So now we have two good, useful tools to help us evaluate performance and make adjustments and improve practice: the risk assessments and the monitoring report that we're required to do as well. So again, using those as tools to do the best that we can to offer the highest quality services to our customers. If there's no questions on that, we can get to the final item before the open discussion item here. Any questions or concerns about the OSO monitoring, or any lingering questions around the risk assessments? Okay, well, finally, this is one of the most exciting things, I think, which is that, we're looking at RFP season again. I say exciting because on the one hand, it's always good to really take a step back and think about what do we really want to offer in our workforce system, and what kinds of providers are we looking for to help us implement that strategy. So this is always a good time when you look at doing an RFP process to really link up what our strategy is and our local plan to what we need to accomplish. And it's hard to believe that we're already here, but RFPs go out in the spring. We'll need to, at least no later than the spring, go out, preferably probably more towards the end of the year and transitioning into the new year as a required every 3-year process that we have. And you'll recall that we did this last in 2020, in the spring of 2020, and then brought in our new providers, our current providers that we have. They started their contracts effective July 1 of 2020. And so we'll be in 2023 before we know it. I don't want to rush us through the rest of this calendar year, but it is coming. So we need the board now to be authorizing us to engage in the process of meeting with our county procurement office and requesting the ability to be able to undergo an RFP process. And so the board, customarily gives us the green light to move forward and enter into that RFP process. And we think rather than wait to the November meeting to have that discussion, we should have it upfront in August so that we have enough timeline to really look at the design of our RFPs and then, really make sure that those are strong and that we follow any new procurement guidance that we might have had between the last 3 years. Because as you know, things change and personnel change within St. Louis County. And so we want to make sure we have the most updated policies and procedures for that. But we're also going to take this time, and we'll invite the board to help support this, but we're going to take this time to also imagine perhaps different ways that we might deliver services. And again, all aligned to that strategic vision that we have in our local plan. But it's a good time to take stock of how we've been structuring our RFPs, or our programs, I should say, and then using the new RFPs as an opportunity to maybe be a little innovative about what kinds of things we want to contract out for, because we have a lot of discretion in terms of how we contract services. So there'll be more board discussion for that. We might have some preliminary thoughts to share at the board meeting, but certainly by the November meeting too, we can share the proposals for what the design looks like and ultimately get the board's input on that as well. And there's probably a good opportunity for some in between meetings to help maybe even get some board members to actually engage in our RFP process. Typically that's developed by the staff, but it probably wouldn't hurt to invite the board to also, if they're interested, to maybe participate in an ad hoc committee of sorts that might help give some guidance to our RFPs. That was literally just something that I was thinking about as I was talking. So staff haven't heard me say that yet either, but I'm just putting it out there as kind of parts of consideration, because I know many of you committee members and board members may have some good ways of thinking about what it will take to really become the best workforce board in the state of Missouri or even in the country. And so that a lot of that really is how we design our programs, which is what this RFP process is about. So at the board meeting, to put a period on this, at the board meeting, we'll be asking the board to authorize us to begin the design of the RFPs for the release of the 2023 RFPs, and then also approve us to undergo the required steps at the county level from a legal and policy process standpoint that we need to, that oftentimes takes at least 6 months in many cases to get these RFPs out on the street and to get bids for those proposals. So that would be the action that we're asking the board to take, and we will be asking for a vote from the board on that. Any questions about that or concerns?
I have a question, concern, comment. I don't know how to say it, but now, Dr. Manning, now I can go back to your report. I don't know, as a board, we have these oversight tools. We just, like you just said, we just learned about the risk assessment and then the monitoring report. And I'm glad to hear you say you wanted to try something new. I remember being on the RFP committee, been on the board for a while. And so is this the opportunity to change some of the ways that we do things? So I think what jumped out to me was when Dr. Manning was walking through that, and the International Institute gets graded on WIOA enrollments when their role is really language translation and stuff. And I hate to ping an organization that's goal is different than what they're like. Get creative, but when you explain it to the board, I almost feel like the board needs to see how it used to be, and then maybe what staff is deciding it's different. Like, are these monitoring and oversight reports, can we put them into RFP language instead of always doing contract corrections and stuff? I don't know. I'm just kind of wanting to challenge us to do something new. I remember I got to meet with every member of the board, and they're all excited, but they kind of want to see something. And Greg, I was glad to hear you say that. So I don't, that's all I kind of wanted to say, but I've been sitting on it since Dr. Manning got down to the International Institute. And I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah. So the good deal is, Jason, is we're not operating on a business as usual platform, if that makes sense. Again, these risk assessments are very helpful because, again, it makes us hold ourselves accountable and hold our sub-recipients accountable The contractual language that I speak upon actually are RFPs. They have a lot of the contractual information in them. Not exact, they're not exactly, but our RFPs are heavy in contractual information that they would need to adhere to if they were, won that bid, or if they were awarded that bid. So that's on the same page. But to your point, I do believe that these risk assessments are necessary. I do believe that they will be effective because this is information that will be shared with the board on an ongoing basis, and these risk assessments will be annually. So in order to keep the board abreast of what's to come, we will definitely be given updates, and maybe that's something the committee we can discuss on how do we disseminate this information during the year so that when this report is received, at the end of the program year, they understand the reasoning behind the risk rating, if that makes sense. So yes, that is something that we will need to be deliberate about, because again, we're going to be held accountable for how accountable we're holding our subrecipients. Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Manning.
Thank you, Jason.
All right, any further discussion on the RFPs? All right, well then the final item or area is open discussion. I don't think, unless you all want to have more open discussion to close out our Friday, the only thing that we normally have at the very end of the agenda, except for having the opportunity to have open discussion about any topic that you might be interested in, is to develop the agenda. But anybody have any points you want to put before the committee before we cover that last item of developing the agenda? Okay, well, the develop the agenda is always a element that we, oh, I'm sorry, Vanessa, or Dr. Manning, who's talking.
It's Vanessa. I do have something, but I'm not sure whether it's appropriate whether I ask the question of you by yourself or you and Jason, but I was just curious about, again, the partnerships with like the Lighthouse for the Blind, or any other organization that caters to special needs.
Sure. Yeah. You want to discuss?
I spoke with them. Oh, I'm sorry. I spoke with them as well because I be transparent. I was on an interview. I spoke with them, and there was hesitancy with, I heard, a lot of tentativeness from them, not specific, but tentative. And then I don't know if I sensed that here today, but is there something like from a partnership perspective that may have happened in the past, or that's not a direction that we want to go into, I guess? I'm just curious. It's not a discussion for the full board, of course, but I thought maybe the executive committee, we could talk about that.
Yeah, I'm not, so in this organization, I'm not really familiar of a previous partnership with them or just over your general comment around special needs and being inclusive that they would have any reticence about, but I don't know if other staff prior to some of these things go back a ways, if there's an issue like even 5 to 10 years ago, it sometimes can come up, but I'm not aware of anybody else on the team.
Greg, to my knowledge, I'm not aware of it either.
Okay. Because again, they manufacture products and they kit for the government. So I'm sure everyone's familiar with like CLR, right? That calcium, lime, and rust. Mm-hmm. That chemical. They actually kit or package that chemical. So it's 2 manufacturing plants. There's one in Overland and there's one in Berkeley. And I believe the Berkeley one is really struggling with head count. And they typically cater to, again, people with low vision or they are legally blind. That's a large portion of their employee base. However, they employ folks who are not legally blind or low vision, and low vision could come from several reasons. It could be hereditary, but by and large, they have a need, a headcount need as far as employment, and they seem like they pay living wages, so it might be a great partnership, and it lends to being inclusive as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes, I'll just say, Vanessa, from my experience, sometimes when you talk about partnering with a workforce board or government entity, some folks wonder how is that going to play out, because they maybe haven't done it before, or they're not really sure of how that works. And so I don't want to say that may be the reason for the tentativeness on their part, some of the folks that you've been talking to, but I know that there have been partners in the past that we've reached out to, and you can tell there's a little bit of well, how does this really work, and how do I work with, what is WIOA, what is this board, how do I work with a workforce board, that we've had to explain, and once explained and kind of walk through, there's eagerness to partner. So maybe if you can help us just facilitate some of the conversation, and we can see where there might be a good fit, and not make anyone feel like they have to commit to anything, but really just explore what might offer value to them and what they could offer that would add value to our efforts too.
Absolutely. And I was really looking for, looking more of at least getting exposure, because I think they're like the best kept secret, and they shouldn't be a secret. They're manufacturing.
Right. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, we'll stand by, and if you want to make that connection, we'll welcome it.
Okay, I'll see what I can do, for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, the only other item, unless there's other open discussion items, the only other item is to just more or less approve the agenda that we've kind of covered here in this executive finance committee meeting as the agenda for the board. And so I would just turn it over back to you, Jason, if you want to see if anyone has a motion to.
Are you going to group them by votes like we've been doing on our other meetings, or not?
Yeah, I think we should, and we always do. We've been doing, or we need to do that up front because we don't want to lose members towards the end. Yes, so we'll group the board votes like last meeting, and then we'll run through the motions and allow folks to vote before we get into other business.
So, can we entertain a motion to adjourn?
Loris, do we need them to formally approve the agenda here, or we just? I can't remember. I'm sorry.
No, we don't.
Okay.
The only thing that probably will add, Greg, is I made a note to make sure that we break out the budget transfer aside from your report. But other than that, if this is what we want, then they just need to say this is okay, and we'll go forward with that. It doesn't need to be formal.
Okay. All right, great. Well, I see that Cinia had to leave the meeting. I just saw her send something in the chat just a few minutes ago. So we still have a quorum, thankfully, Jason. But if you want to get a motion from Vanessa to adjourn.
Would you like to make a motion to adjourn?
Yes, I'd make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
All right, I second. Thank you.
Great weekend, everyone.
All right, have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Jason, are you calling the meeting adjourned?
Yes.
Okay, 4:39. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.